Well, welcome to the More Than Your Age podcast, Carly Olsen. Glad to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so happy to have you joining me today. Carly, you have a handful of things that really fit into the more than your age idea, the realm, the just like the mission that I have behind the podcast. And so for the listeners, we might kind of be jumping, and also for you, Carly, we might kind of be jumping, but not. I mean, this is your story. And so there's just a handful of things that I really want to tackle and talk about and address that I think will just really resonate with the listeners as well.
Yeah.
And so I do want to hear about you. You had a significant other who you loved so much, the love of your life. I want to hear how you guys met.
So we actually met many, many years before we were actually together. We were actually on the same bodybuilding team back when we both lived in Colorado. So we knew of each other and we were just friendly right after I kind of joined our team. I moved out of Colorado. So we just stayed in touch over social media. He was actually married at the time, and then he went through a divorce, and I was in a relationship, and then my relationship ended, and he was in a relationship. So it was just like years, 7 years of us like never quite connecting at the right time until one day we did.
Wow. So when you finally made that, you knew each other, the connection, what did life look like for you?
It was actually kind of in the middle of COVID. So it was both of us were really kind of struggling, I think, as everyone was, to like what is next and what is possible in our lives. So we were both working. He was a very, very successful business owner. I was thinking of starting my business that I have now. I was kind of in the middle of that transition. And we were both kind of battling health issues at the same time, talking about business things at the same time. We were going through a lot of the same parallels in like a tumultuous time for the whole world. So it was really us kind of supporting on each other and leaning on each other. And he was one of the few people, I mean, all the people close to me at the time, we weren't allowed to see each other because it was COVID. So I just kind of felt really isolated. And the fact that we started our relationship long distance in a time where even your closest friends were long distance, it just kind of fit. And we felt closer to each other than we were with the people that were physically around us just because of the nature of the world.
Hmm. Yeah. The relationship eventually ended due to his passing, and I want to acknowledge that. And I want to know for you, because I know it was sudden, how did that affect you and how did that change your life?
So I mean, as probably listeners can imagine, or anyone that's gone through loss, where it was extremely sudden, very unexpected. And when something like that happens, he was very young. He was in his late 30s. So it wasn't like a grandparent passing or someone who was sick for a long time. He had a lot of health complications, but it wasn't something where it was like an expected thing. So it was, I don't like using this word because I feel like it's a cultural thing to throw it around, but it was traumatic. Like it was very traumatic. And it was one of those things where it took up until very, very recently. It's been several years since his passing, and I have only just started being able to allow myself to grieve. And it's been it was a rough few years because you just wake up one day and your person isn't there. And after so long of them being like a cornerstone of your life and everything that he was involved in with my business, my health, like where my future was going, and then he quite literally almost like evaporated out of my life. I didn't really know who I was because he was so much a part of me. It was almost like underwent an identity crisis when he passed on. I didn't know. I felt guilty for moving on. I felt guilty for doing anything in my business that we had talked about. I felt guilty for just any of the goals that I had that he was always a part of, and now I had to pursue without him. So it was more so than just like losing another person. It really was, I did not know who I was anymore. And that's when, like, at the time, I was going through like a really big spiritual transition. And if anything, his passing really had me heavily, heavily have to rely on my faith and spirituality to get through it because I just couldn't on my own.
Yeah, and saying that, you were an atheist for several decades.
Yes.
So, with mentioning of because of his passing kind of leading you to your faith of where you are now, how did you get to the point of being an atheist? Did you grow up that way? I'd love to know whatever you're willing to share with that, kind of how you got there to where you were able to get to the faith where you're at now.
Yeah, so I grew up, um, I was baptized according to my mom's family. I was baptized Episcopalian when I was a baby, but I grew up in New England, Orthodox Ukrainian Catholic, which was my dad's side. So it was very like Gothic cathedrals. Masses were in a different language. My family's Ukrainian, so like mass was in Ukrainian. It was like 2 to 3 hour masses. When I would stay at my grandparents' house, I'd have to say my prayers in Ukrainian, and it was a lot of just kind of like the legalistic part of religion that is still very traditional. All of my family is still back in New England, and that is kind of like that was the church environment that I was exposed to growing up. It was a lot more Catholicism, where now I live in Texas and it's almost difficult to find Catholics like
Yeah.
where I am. But like up in New England, that's like majority, everyone is Catholic. And my grandmother was first generation American. She spoke Ukrainian and Polish fluently, but I didn't speak the language. So I was having to go to these masses and say prayers and do all these things in a language, and I had no idea what I was saying. So I didn't really have that connection to God and to the Holy Spirit, and I didn't really understand it because I just was saying words, saying sounds just so my grandma would let me go to bed at night. I didn't really know what I was doing. So, I had an experience when I was 13. My cousin, who was my very best friend, I grew up in a large family with 15 guy cousins and a brother. I was the only girl. So my cousin, who was my age, was like my closest friend in my family just because we were the same age. He unexpectedly passed away in a tragic accident. And I remember I was 13 years old. I remember sitting at his funeral, and the priest was at the altar, and all he kept repeating over and over was, I didn't really know him, but it was time for God to call him home. I can't really say anything about him. I didn't really know him, but it was his time to go. And I remember 13 years old just sitting there, and I was so angry, and it was just like anger. And I was like, you may not have known him, but I knew him. Why aren't you saying anything? And he just kept saying, like, it was his time. God wanted him. It was his time to go. And again, just like, I couldn't wrap my brain around how that was like, how could God possibly need my best friend at 13 years old? There's no reason for that. I couldn't fathom. So I remember sitting at his funeral, and in my head saying, I don't believe in God. And I just made that statement, like, there is
Wow.
no God, because he would not have wanted my cousin if there was a God. So literally 20 years, anytime found myself in a spiritual situation, I would almost make myself go back there and feel that anger and just be like, nope, no, there's no God. Remember, he took your cousin. Um, so I had no problem with holding on to that anger and just kind of the disconnected relationship I had had with church anyway. I had no problem letting it go. But I held on to that anger for so long. It was more so than just not believing. I would like repel the idea. If someone brought it into a conversation, I would scoff at them. I would make fun of them. I was just mean about it. And then after my boyfriend passed and I found myself in just a really, really dark place, it kind of, for months after his passing, it sounds cheesy to say if there are non-believers listening to this, but it was the first time that I absolutely without a doubt knew that God was speaking to me and he was calling me back to him, because I can't explain any other reason why I would have gone back to him unless I heard him and I felt him and he was telling me to come back to him after 20 years. And I did. And now me and God are close. We're tight. We have a great relationship now.
So that's really fascinating because I just think from one devastating loss is where it was shutting God. He's not there. You don't exist. Why would you allow this, or why would you do this? You can't. Therefore, you don't exist. To another devastating loss as well is what 20 years later is what brought you back to him. And I'm curious to know that where you are currently, when you look back and think of 13-year-old self and that comment that that priest made, which is very insensitive, like read your room. How do you, because now you do have a faith, how do you, I guess, reconcile that hurt and that pain and the comment that he made to what you believe now?
Um, I mean, you hear about it all the time, how leadership in churches are not, they are very legalistic and they are into the rituals, and I don't want to I don't want to bring this into it, but just like the power of it. And especially, again, I see, because I am from the Northeast, I live in the South now, and the nature of churches is so radically different. And I never knew that church could be a family, that there could be people and believers and Christians that were just like you. Like, this sounds so silly, but like they're just regular people. Because like how I grew up, it was like if you were religious, if you went to church, you had a certain demeanor about you. It was like church was like a no fun zone. It was like you were just boring and strict and like mean, and only old people went to church, and it was just like it I couldn't fathom it because of how I grew up. And I think being exposed to different types of Christians and different environments, and actually giving myself an opportunity, because I've just become much more open-minded as I've aged anyway, but just giving myself the opportunity to understand what spirituality is to different groups of people. I mean, 13-year-old me didn't know any better. I knew
Yeah.
one church where my family brought me to. So that was the lens of this one thing right here. This is God. This is religion. This is spirituality. I had no concept of anything else out there.
Yeah. Well, and then when you flash forward and you experience this loss and you hear God speaking to you, how did you know it was him? How did you know where to go next? Or did you know people that were talking to you? Kind of how did that unfold?
No, so it's just kind of a scene out of a movie. So um, the church, I'm still a part of it. I've been a part of this church for going on 5 years now, and it was, it's still right down the street from me. But at the time, I was living in an apartment complex you could literally walk to the church from there. So every day I would be going to and from work, and I would be driving past this building. And after his passing, he passed away in September. It was probably December before I noticed that there was a church there. Because, like, coming from Catholicism, like a Catholic church, it's like like a Catholic church, it's a Catholic church when you drive by it. But here it was just like, it was a very modern building, and my church is called Hope City. There was like a sign that says Hope City in nice lettering, and I never really knew it was a church. It was 2 months later, I'm just kind of driving by and I noticed the sign. And I was like, huh, Hope City. Like, wonder what that is. And I would drive by, and then a week or two later, I'd just kind of like turn my head a little bit more, and I noticed the building. And I was like, oh, that's a church. That's a weird building for it to be in a church. That's a cool building. And then I just keep driving, and I don't know how else to explain it other than every time I drove by this building twice a day, every single time I drove by it, I just kind of felt like a magnet. Like, it was just like I felt like I needed to look at it. And I was just kind of like, why am I so aware of this building? I remember thinking that, like, why am I aware of this building? So another month goes by, and I kept having like this intrusive thought of, you need to go in. And I was like, in my head, again, I was like, Carly, you're an atheist. You don't go to church. What do you like? Why are you thinking this right now? Stop it. And I just kept like talking myself out of it. And it was one day in late January. I had just spent the holidays without my boyfriend, which was really, really hard. The first like holidays we were supposed to
Yeah.
spend with our families and all of that. And I remember just sitting in my apartment and I was just going through a really hard time. I was not in a good place. And I can't tell you what happened other than, in a sense, I blacked out. I just woke up one Sunday, showered, put clothes on, got in my car, drove down the street, and it was like I came to, and I didn't even look up the service times. I didn't know I was going there. I just kind of like looked up and I was in front of the church and service was starting. And I was like,
Whoa.
why am I here right now? But I was like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to go in, but I'm not going to talk to anyone. And I go in and everyone is so nice and just welcoming me and like, hi, I've never seen you before. And I was like, yeah, of course you haven't. I've never been here. And I was just like, I was probably like just not very nice to people. I wasn't mean, but I was just like very, like no one talked to me. So I went in and I sat in the last row in the back corner and the music started. And church down here, I don't know how it is at other people's churches, it was like a live band. And I almost like felt my Mimi roll over in her grave. Like, oh my gosh, there's an electric guitar on stage in church. Like, what is this? And I was just like, there was like the lights came on and the band started playing, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, what kind of church is this? And the music starts playing, and I start listening to the music. Every time I tell this story, I start to cry, so I'm going to try to hold it together. I started listening to the lyrics of the song, and it was like I felt my late boyfriend and God like put their arms around me, like their arm over my shoulder. Like I could literally feel their arms on my shoulders. And they just said, it's okay. You're safe now. You're home. And I just started bawling. Like the whole hour and a half service, I just like ugly cried, like mascara everywhere. I was like kneeling on the floor, like sobbing. I just let go of grief. I had cried maybe one time since my boyfriend passed away. I was
Wow.
very much not grieving, and I just let it go. And it was so clear to me. It wasn't like I heard a voice, but I heard it like in my heart. I very much know that God spoke to me and he said those words to me. And I just was like, okay, God, like I hear you, I see you, let's do this. And if I have not physically been to that church, I have watched it online. If I have been traveling or something on a Sunday, I've been every single week for going on 4 years now. And that's my ongoing conversation with him. And it took a while to, as any new believer, you don't quite understand scripture. You don't quite understand the significance of it. I started going to the services way sooner than I actually started reading scripture. So the pastors would reference scripture and I would have no idea what they were talking about or who they were talking about. And if it was Old Testament, it was like the something nights and the something nights and the something nights, and they all sounded the same. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. But it's been years of just slowly, gradually, just making sure that I understand why I am doing this. And it's just been, I have great relationships with the people in the church, but still none of my friends go to church. Very few members of my family go to church. It's just been something that it's just for me, and it's my own thing, and I don't need anyone else's influence. So it's been something very, very personal the last few years.
Oh, I bet. I mean, it's obviously the Holy Spirit, but when you were going to work, just slowly you would see the building and then you start noticing. And always there was just something about it every single time. And like you said, there wasn't this beautiful structure for you to physically pay attention to. It was just this modern building that you noticed, and so that was God nudging you there when you started attending, and even now. What for the friends that didn't that kind of knew you before? Did they notice things differently about you? Did they say anything to you about it?
I have been very surprised, like very pleasantly surprised. Um, One, just how many, more surprised, if anything, how many of my friends and networks are Christians, but they don't talk about it. So like I had no idea. Like I made a post on my social media. Last year I got rebaptized at my church and I posted about my baptism, and it was my most engaged social media post I've ever had. And I do marketing for a living. I'm like trying to get people to engage. And all I do is post about a baptism. And it's like double the engagement of any post I've ever made. And I'm like, really this? But it was people that commenting or DMing me and congratulating me, like really, really beautiful messages. And I had no idea they were Christians. I had no idea they went to church. They never talk about it. So I didn't know. And then it just kind of hit me. It's like, well, like I need to talk about it more because I'm doing the same thing. But I was just really surprised at how my friends and my family that still do not go to church, they don't necessarily believe it, or they do it to check the boxes. My pastor calls it the creasters. They go on Christmas and Easter, but like the creasters, I never really talked about it until I got baptized and was ready to make that public declaration. I was just kind of afraid that they would put me down the same way I, for 20 years, would put people down. So I was almost like, I don't want karma to come back and get me for all the years I put people down. I'm just not going to say anything. But once I did start opening up about it, my parents, who haven't been to church unless it's a wedding or a funeral, they haven't been to church in 20 years either. And they were so proud of me and so supportive. And my mom flew out here to go to my baptism just to watch, and she didn't understand anything, but she came out to support me. So it's just been a really great experience of I was always kind of afraid of religion and afraid of talking about it, and now I just feel silly. I'm like, why was I afraid? Like no one, if they're good people, and I like to think everyone in my life is a good person, that's who I surround myself with. Why would I be afraid that they would be mad at me or say something bad? Like they're good people. They're going to support me no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really neat. Something you shared with me, you said that the pain that you experienced was written into your purpose. What was it about that pain that has given you a purpose, and what is this purpose?
So I truly believe that the purpose that God gave me, and this is kind of blanket statement because I mean this is true of anyone who follows Jesus' teachings, but I think my purpose is truly to care for, and I've always felt that I am just hyper empathetic and sensitive to other people's energies, and it is very difficult for me to put myself first. I make sure everyone around me has everything that they need, has everything that they want. If I even sense someone is upset or sad or struggling, I drop what I am doing and I try to make them better before I even think about myself. And going through just like when I look back on the decades that I was just dead set on being an atheist, I was full of anger. I was just angry person all the time, just mad, just day to day. That was my default emotion. And more than that, like I was in pain. I was still grieving my cousin, but I was just in pain because I was missing the part of humanity that is to have a relationship with God. He designed us to have a relationship with him. And I didn't. And I truly believe that's just why my life was pure chaos. I was angry. I went through challenges. I went through, I was a mess in my 20s, as most people are, but I really just think it was because that piece was just not there. And all of that pain kind of, it's so clear to me now that that's what it was. Um, now that I lean on him and I have that relationship with him, like a pastor a few weeks ago told me, like, we have to look to him as a father. Like, he is our holy father. And the more that we give to him, just like a father that takes care of his children, we have to give it to him in order for him to take care of it. And it has allowed me to fulfill my purpose of taking care of others. I have to give my pain and the things that I'm struggling with to him. And I can't hold on to grieving losses or having all of this pain and holding on to it as long as I did. My life was never going to get better until something forced me to hit rock bottom enough to say, I can't do this anymore. Here, you can have it. And giving it to him and having that relationship to him has freed me up enough so that I can give him my pain, knowing that he's going to take care of it, knowing that he's going to guide me. And then I can be that for other people that need me.
Yeah. It's beautiful that you came to have an understanding of who God is in an insanely low part of your life, where there's this grief happening, huge loss that's happening, where a lot of people can use it to blame God, or to use it to say, well, then God, you're not there, and kind of like 13-year-old self had experienced, and then now you've experienced this whole new experience with the Lord, to where He's just transformed your life. He's giving you this whole new purpose, and as you have this new purpose, and I don't know the timeline for all this, and you can feel free to just to share that too. But I want to know, how did this purpose play into your current business that you have after leaving the corporate world? You have this serve first mentality, like you just were sharing. How is that different than what you had experienced in your previous career?
So it was actually my last job in my corporate career that I ever had. I had a female supervisor who was one of the only female supervisors I've ever had in my career. So that should say something about leadership. She had this profound impact on me, and she just happened to be a woman. I noticed, she never explicitly said it, but I noticed with her, every time we would have like a one-on-one or we would have a meeting, she would usually, you go into meetings. I spent 13 years in corporate marketing. Usually you go into these meetings and you have your notes and you're all like, "Oh, I have to give an update. I have to make sure that I have stuff to prove to her that I did my job, and I have to give analytics and all this stuff." And you go in all anxious. And every single time I met with her, the very first thing that she would say to me, I would go in her office and we'd sit down for our meeting, and she would be like, "What do you need? What can I help you with?" And it was her asking me, like, "What can I do for you? Like, you're 2 levels below me, but like, how can I help you? Do you have everything you need? Was anything overwhelming? Can I take it off your plate for you?" And that shift of like, what have you done for me, to what can I do for you? It made me want to work so hard for her. It made me want to do good. It made me not want to cut corners. It made me want to stay late. It made me, during like crazy hectic times of the year, it made me want to say, like, "Do you need anything? I notice you are stressed. How can I do extra for you?" And she never asked me that. She never called it out that that's what she was doing, but I was very aware of it because it was so different. And I started implementing that right after that. It was, again, COVID had a lot to do with it, but I transitioned into starting my own marketing and branding consulting brand to specifically help small to medium-sized businesses and entrepreneurs. I wanted to step away from corporate because I saw a need of business owners, which I experience, I'm sure you experience as a podcast owner, a business owner too. You have to do everything yourself, and you have to learn things you don't want to learn. You learn things that take up too much time. You end up doing them haphazardly. Like, you do things just to get them done, and then 6 months, 12 months, 3 years down the road, you have to redo them because they weren't done well. But you're just trying to survive. You're a business owner. You have so many things on your plate. So I saw a need of, if I can work with these people and just really develop an understanding of small businesses and just starting out, and help people with small teams, small budgets, prioritize what they need to do for their brand so that they can grow and not have to redo everything in a year. If I can take that stress off their plate, if I can serve them, if I can just make their life a little bit easier so they can be successful, that's what I want to do. And always have my past supervisor's mentality in my head of that is how I operate my business. And I think it's very rooted in Christianity and serving people. And like the Bible even says, like, you have to be a servant to others or you have nothing. You have to serve everyone. That's how I approach my clients. That's how I start and end every meeting. That's how I check in with them, even if I haven't done work for them for 6 months, a year, 2 years. I check in with them and I'm like, hey, I'm not trying to get another project started. I don't want your money, but are you okay? What can I do? What can I do better? How are the results that you saw from the website we did 2 years ago? Does anything need to be tweaked? Oh, then we just started a new year. I took the liberty of going into your website and fixing these 3 things I noticed were out of date. But don't worry, you don't have to pay me. I just want to help you. And I ran by operating that way, by acting that way. I replaced my corporate income my first year in business, which is unheard of. Rule of thumb is it usually takes at least 2 to 5 years to make a profit off of a new business. I replaced my corporate income in the first year and I worked completely off of referrals for my first 2 years. I never marketed myself. I never so much as made a social media post about what I was doing. I didn't even a marketing person who I literally build websites for a living. I did not have my own website my first 2 years of my business, but I was so successful because I just want to serve people and help people. And a lot of the times I will say no to money if I know that you have a genuine need and I know that a door will open for me somewhere down the line and it'll all even out. I know I trust God that he'll provide for me as long as I keep coming forward with a service first attitude. And it's been working out pretty good so far, so can't
Wow.
complain.
That's amazing. So when you said like in your first 2 years it was referral only, how were you able then to get your first person if it was referral if you hadn't had the business prior?
It was just contacts and my networks of I mean, 13 years in the industry. Like, I had a lot of people that I just knew or we had done favors for each other. And like my whole corporate career, I never had a role where we left on bad terms. So a lot of times, like, it was people that I used to work with. And even though I left them, we still had that much respect and rapport with each other where I could reach out to them for help. A lot of it was just local networking groups, business coaching groups that I was a part of. My whole career, I was very much into professional development. So it was just meeting people who we were all collectively trying to be better at our careers. So even if I didn't technically work with them, they knew how hard I was working on myself and I could reach out to them and they knew my character well enough to be like, I've never even seen what you can do, but I know you're a good person, so I'll go tell my friend about you. So it really was just I feel like I had been preparing to start this business my whole career for 13 years, and I didn't even know I was preparing for it. I just had done everything what I thought was the right way, and it all worked out.
And you just said you didn't know that you had been preparing for it, but you were just throughout your career. At what point did you know that you wanted to kind of branch off on your own? And then when you were younger, did you have this entrepreneurial mindset as well about you, or did that kind of happen later?
I always had like a business-oriented mindset, and I say that in the way where I'm very methodical, I'm very organized, and I look at things strategically. I mean, that played a huge part in my me being an atheist for so many years was like I couldn't understand it and I didn't have proof and I couldn't make sense. So therefore, I was correct. There was no God. And it was only after I let that go and was like this doesn't make sense to me, and that's okay. So all this other stuff that doesn't make sense to me, that could be true also. So I need to just let go of control. I've always had a business-oriented mindset. That being said, I hate like I'm very good at speaking. I'm very good at educating. I'm very good at turning it on, a personality, but I am a hermit. Like 6 days out of the week, I can't, I get very overstimulated. I need to recharge my social battery after I go to networking events. I'm very, very introverted. So for me, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur in the sense of like, I thought of entrepreneurship when I was younger, and entrepreneurship wasn't a thing, showing my age in my late 30s. Like when I was in high school, college, like entrepreneurship wasn't really a thing. It was like we were still very much like you go to college and you get a 9 to 5 job after.
Right.
Like that's how I was brought up at least. So I never really thought it would was possible. I just knew my parents were going to send me to college and I was going to get a corporate job and then I was going to retire and then I was going to die. That was like my life trajectory. So, but I knew I wanted to help businesses grow. In the first half of my career, I actually worked in nonprofit work for probably the first 8 years of my career. I really wanted, again, I wanted to help people and I wanted to make people's lives easier and I wanted to fix problems. And then I quickly realized unless you are at the very top and you're doing some questionable things, you can't make a whole lot of money in nonprofit work. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna stick to my morals, but I'm gonna leave the nonprofit worlds because I do want to make money. I do want to like have that business growth. So that's kind of why I transitioned into corporate marketing. But so I knew, and I think a lot of people are ashamed to talk about money. There's like a stigma around money, but it's okay to want to make money because you need money to do good in the world. You need money to help other people. You need to be okay and have abundance in order to pass that abundance on to other people. So that is I hesitate talking about money and making money because I know some people are like, if she wants to make money, that's bad. But if it is to serve others, to help others grow, to help others be successful also, that is when money really, really is good and can be used for good if you do have an abundance mindset around it. I forgot the first part of the question that you asked me.
Oh, goodness. I'm trying to even remember what I asked you.
Or the entrepreneurial mindset part, but I forgot what the first
Yeah,
part.
just kind of how you took that leap. But I think you answered.
Yeah. So honestly, I wish I had like a really romantic story to tell you about how I dreamed of starting my own business and something miraculous happened and I started it and it was successful. I honestly started my business in the middle of a mental breakdown. And I was so burnt out. I was working for a marketing agency at the time. And if anyone has ever worked for agency life, it is not corporate. It is not nonprofit. It is not small business. It is its own animal. And they are cutthroat. And I was working 16, 18-hour days, 6 days a week, no vacation time. Like if you had a 5 minute gap in your schedule, they filled it with 15 minutes of work. And it was just, I tried to do that. I did that. I only lasted like 4 months and it started getting really nasty. I did not like how people were treating me, how people were treating each other, how people were treating their clients. There was a lot of shady things going on, a lot of manipulation, and I was just, everything about this feels icky. I need to get out. And it was one of those things where it was, again, that kind of old school mindset of, well, you don't leave a job until you have another job lined up, and you have to do things in this order, and it has to be an easy transition, and you have to have health insurance, and you have to have all these things, and you can't have any gaps in your resume, and all this stuff. And it eventually just got so bad. I was having really serious health issues, and I very much believe that when your mental health is not okay, it manifests in your body. And I don't think it was a coincidence that I was getting very, very ill at that time of my life. So it was on top of my mental stress. My body was starting to break down. And I had a weekend where I went to a networking event, I went to a business coaching group event, and I had my biggest supporters around me, my best friends who were also starting businesses. And I remember they were around me in the kitchen and of this Airbnb we were staying at. And I typed up an email to my boss and I just said, hey, I will give you a month's notice. I want to leave all of my clients in a great place. I want to finish up all my projects. I know this is sudden. I'm so sorry. Like, whatever I can do to make your life easier, please let me know. Within 20 minutes, they emailed me back on a Sunday. Within 20 minutes, they emailed me back and said, thanks for the notice. It's not necessary. Today's your last day. We'll ship your office to you.
Oh my
And I
goodness.
was like, okay. And I will never work for an agency again. So it just gave very much clarity how disposable I was and like that I was making the right decision, that they did not value me as even a human being to respond to me that way. So I woke up the next morning and I remember my business coach at the time saying, you just need to jump and you need to build your wings on the way down, because if you have a plan B, you are never going to be 100% into plan A. So I was like, okay, I'm self-employed, I guess. This is plan A. Let's do it. And my first week, I made a social media post about it because I have the notebook right here. I just made a to-do list of just who can I call, who can I email, who can I like type up a random services list of, hey, here's what I can do. Does your business need it? And I slapped a logo on it and I named it and I was like, this is my business, I guess. And that first week, I just phone calls and emails for 8 hours a day. And within a week, I had a couple projects lined up and it just went. And I finished up those projects, and then those people loved it and they referred me, and those people referred me. And it just accidentally grew into a business, but I had no idea what I was doing. None. I was just, I have no money and rent is due in 2 weeks and I need projects. Please help me. That's how my business started. So
Wow.
it worked. And it was just, I really do believe unless you make something the only choice you have, you're always going to find a reason not to do it. But if it is the only choice you have, you will somehow make it work.
Yeah.
I had bills to pay, so I made it work. And that's kind of turned into my mantra, because I don't want to make it seem to listeners like I don't like romanticizing business ownership, because I still work 18-hour days sometimes, but it's for me and it's for clients that I love, doing work I love. And I still have months where it's questionable if I'm going to pay rent. I've replaced my income, but I'm also doing things that are much more expensive. So sometimes that cushion gets really small. And I've had months where I didn't know if I could make rent that month. But my mantra for myself is, you're going to handle it. And I just give myself a moment to breathe. And I'm like, I handled it once, I can handle it again. I'll take care of it. And I've somehow always taken care of it because I have to. And as a business owner, you have a problem that you don't think is possible, it doesn't matter. You have to take care of it and you'll find a way to do it.
Oh man, yeah, that was so well said. I really like how, well, one, how your business coach said, if you have a plan B, you're not going to go 100% in plan A. Is so true. And oh, I'm trying to remember what else you just said. That was really, really, really good. I will definitely tag it to share that out loud, because I was like, man, that's so good. Oh no, I was just going to say too that just I like how you don't like to romanticize business ownership, because it can on the outside can look so glamorous. Like, oh my gosh, they're doing all this. And yes, we want to support and be proud of you for working hard and what you're doing. But it's not just this overnight success of, like you were putting the hours in, you're putting the work in. It is hard work. There are months where you're questioning whether or not you're going to be able to make rent, but it's for your clients, it's for your business. And so that's kind of the shift in that. And so I think that's really cool. I want to kind of hop over because this is another really neat part of your story for the listeners as well. We don't have a ton of time left, so we'll just kind of briefly go to this, but you also participate in competitive bodybuilding. That is cool. And I want to know how you got involved in it. And because you mentioned earlier that you were doing it. And so had you been doing it for a while?
So, no. So, this is another one of those things. Like, I wish I had this like movie plotline story of how I got into it, but I got into it just because people told me that I couldn't do it. And then I accidentally got obsessed with it because I grew up, I was like, sorry if this isn't sensitive. I was the fat kid growing up. I was bullied very, very bad. It's why my cousin and I were so close before he passed, because he was like the fat kid at his school too. So like we would call each other and I would call him crying very frequently after school because I would get like, again, like showing my age, like when you would three-way call people on the house phone and you'd star 69 so they couldn't see your phone
Yeah.
number. Like, I would get prank called. I would get hate notes put in my binder at
Oh
school. Like,
gosh.
people hated me just because I was overweight. I had no, until I was in high school, I did not get invited to birthday parties. I did not go to sleepovers. I spent every single weekend just with my family. Like, I had no friends. My cousin was my very best friend, and he understood what it was like. So it was, I carried that. I mean, still to this day, I could have a six pack on stage, like with my tan and my makeup and my bikini, and I still feel like 13-year-old me that was bullied. It never goes away. So that has been a really rough kind of image of myself to work through, even into adulthood. But I was living in Colorado. Again, that's where I joined my first bodybuilding team in 2015. I was dating someone at the time who was prepping for his first show. He was a trainer in the military, so he was just all fit all the time. And I would like tag along to the gym with him and just like walk uphill on the treadmill and like copy him and do some things. I had no idea what I was doing. And he kept teasing me, you should do a bikini competition. And I was like, stand on stage basically naked and have your body compared to other women. That sounds like the worst thing in the entire world. What are you even asking me to do? So I just kind of like started telling people, like I told my dad is amazing. He's turning 68 this year. He does not look a day over 50. He still lifts weights and runs every week and he's like Mr. Fitness. So of course I shared it with him like, oh, so and so told me I should do this. And his first reaction was, okay, Carly, come on, you don't want to do that. You can't do that. And it was like I told a couple people in my life and they were all like, "Oh, that's only for people who are serious. You don't want to do that." And I was like, "You know what? I do want to do that." I did it and I did not commit to it like I should have. But my goal for that first show in 2015 was just to look like I belonged on stage. That's all I wanted was I want people to not know I'm the fat kid when I stand up there. And I competed against 46 women and I came in seventh. And I was like, wait a second, I placed. Like I had my little medal. I was like, I won a medal because my body was better than 30 something other women. I was like, what? So I was like, maybe I can do it again. And I switched divisions. I switched to a division that was better for my natural body type. I have shoulders like a linebacker, so I had to go into a different division, but my next show, I placed fifth, and then my next show, I placed fourth, and then my next show, I placed second. And then my last show I did, I won my class and almost got my pro card to be a professional bodybuilder. And I was like, wait a second, I can actually do something because you grow up with body image issues. And what's the first thing people tell you, especially like growing up in the 90s, early 2000s? I was told all the time, like looking at these magazines, back when people read magazines, like, oh, you're just big boned. I got
Mm.
told that all the time. Like, you're Ukrainian, you're big boned, you're Eastern European. Like, you can never look like that. It's just your body. It's just how your body is. It's just your genetics. Like, you can't ever, those people are photoshopped. And once I did my first show and I saw that I can look like whatever I want to look like and it doesn't matter, I just have to work really, really hard at it. It hooked me because my mentality about a lot of things in life, especially your body, your business, whatever you want, is you can literally do anything you want to do in life. Anything. There is nothing you cannot do. If you want to be a billionaire, you can be a billionaire. If you want to have 10 successful international businesses, you literally can do that. You just have to want it bad enough and you have to work that hard at it. And it was the same thing with your body. And once I adopted that mindset, it was just like, oh, okay, next year my shoulders got to be bigger. I'll just make my shoulders bigger. Oh, the year after that, my booty has to be bigger. I'll just work and I'll make my booty bigger. Like you design yourself and design your life exactly how you want it. And any challenges that come up, anything you don't think you can do, you give that to God and you let him help you through that. But anything that's under your control, as long as you take ownership of it and work hard enough, you can literally have absolutely anything you want in your life.
That it's just a really cool story. I think I didn't know that part about just your childhood and name calling and everything, and that how it does affect you as an adult. And even you can look a certain way and get these rankings of whatever, and there's still that little girl inside of you that's having that belief about yourself. Something
Yeah.
you shared with me. I'm going to wrap this up, so I'm going to tie my next question to my last question. I'm going to define my question for you. It was, oh yes, this is it. Okay, so you shared with me that in the bodybuilding world, most people retire by the age of 30, and you're not retired. How old are you?
I'm 34. I'm about to turn 35.
Okay. Okay. So I want to know why they retire that early, but I'm sure it's because of their, body or.
There, so I compete in a natural league and a drug tested league. So I don't take like anything. I also don't compete in a prestigious league. If any of your viewers have heard of like the Olympia or something like that, they are not drug tested. They can take enhancements to make their body look bigger faster. I cannot do that. There are some things that I can't even buy at GNC. They're banned. Like certain pre-workouts have banned substances that I'm not allowed to take. So I very much give myself, in one sense, as you get older, your muscle density and your muscle maturity looks better naturally. However, what I'm experiencing now and have been for several years, your body, when you are under stress, I've been doing this for 10 years now. My joints hurt and my back hurts and my ligaments hurt. And I have been in the gym 6 days a week for 10 years on some kind of diet, undergoing hormone issues just naturally as I'm aging. Once women, especially women, hit their early 30s, our testosterone starts plummeting and our muscle density starts getting smaller. And it is just when you compete naturally, it's very hard as you age to keep that youthful look that's competitive. So much so they started creating masters divisions so you can compete against people that are as old as you and not feel so bad. And I'm shooting for a show in a couple months because I really want to compete before I get put into a masters category. Nothing against the women that compete in masters, but I want one more run with the 18-year-olds. I just want to do it one more time before I get put into masters because it's hard. It's really hard on your body as you age. And this is kind of like I grew up with that chip on my shoulder of being overweight and I put it into my self-worth. Like, I'm not good at anything because I'm hated because of my body. I'm also not smart and I'm not good at things and I can't do this and I can't do this. It just played into my self-esteem my whole life. But bodybuilding is the one thing that I have proven to myself, like, I am really good at this and I can do it. And to have your body as you age just kind of be like, I don't really feel like doing that easily anymore. It is such a mental battle. Every day I'm in the gym with a new ache and pain and like about to hurt something. I have a torn rotator cuff. I've had blood clots. Like I'm a mess, but I love it. And until they're wheeling me out on stage in a sparkly bikini in a wheelchair, like I'm not gonna stop. I'm fighting it with everything that I have.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I mean, yeah, I can see all of that. But I love that you're doing it and you're competing against 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds, and you're almost 35, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this one more. I think that is so cool that you're still going after it. And so I want to ask you my last question, which is the question that I ask everybody. You've kind of shared a little bit about it too, like in some of your answers already, but if you have anything else to say, I would love to hear. If you could encourage one woman who does feel blocked or limited to pursue a dream or goal based on her age or a life circumstance. You had a life circumstance situation, multiple for you, and then the age thing with the bodybuilding. If you could encourage her, what would you say to her?
Again, just that I mean, if anything, the passing of two very important people in my life taught me that you're not, anything can change in an instant, whether it is something as severe as passing away or it's something we didn't talk about this, but I had a DVT blood clot a few years ago that almost killed me as a result of taking birth control. It was a side effect of a medication that millions of women are on in the country. Your doctors just feed it to you. And I took it for 12 years and I had a blood clot that literally I was hours away from dying. I was in the ICU for a week. Like I was knocking on death's door. Anything can happen no matter. And I got that blood clot the week of a bodybuilding competition. And I compete in a natural league. I was not on anything. I was not cutting water. So it was nothing related to that. I was the healthiest, the fittest, the leanest I've ever been. I was active. I was in the gym. I still almost died. And you are not promised tomorrow. And it sounds so cliche. And I know a lot of listeners like, you know that you've probably had experiences where it's jarring and you're like, oh gosh, I'm not promised tomorrow, I need to do something. But what I would encourage people to do is just harness that and reflect on that and remember that often, because you have to do whatever you want with your life whenever you want, because you really don't know what's going to happen, whether it's something health related or with another person, or just we've mentioned it a few times, COVID, the world shut down. I couldn't compete the 2 years following COVID because all the shows were canceled. So it's like my passion in life I wasn't allowed to do just because of a global crisis that was out of my control. But you never know what is going to happen, and you have to do whatever you want the moment you want to do it, because you don't know if you're ever going to have another opportunity. And again, if you are willing to work hard enough and if you want it bad enough, you literally can do anything you want to do. I was from someone who was almost taking my own life because I was so overweight and I was bullied so badly and people made me feel like I was nothing, to now I get on stage all spray tanned and sparkly in a bikini. I did that. You can do anything you want to do, and you just have to want it bad enough and do it as soon as you want it, because no one is going to do it for you.
Carly, I like you. I do. I just I mean, you said earlier you speak well. I'm like, she does. She speaks so well. I wanted to tell you that you
Thank you.
just communicate really, really well. I loved what you had to say. Thank you for sharing your story. I'd love you to, real fast before we go, just to plug in where people can find you on social media or your website or your bodybuilding, your business, whichever you want to send them to. And I'll put it also in the show notes.
Yeah, so my website is marketdivergent.com, and I help small businesses and entrepreneurs make really successful brands that stand out. I do branding strategy, websites, digital marketing, all kinds of things. So you can go to my website and see all my services we can work together on. If you do have a business or you're thinking about starting a business, or you just want to have a personal brand on social media or just to market yourself, I can help you with that. And then my Instagram, I have an emotional attachment to it. It makes no sense to my business, but my Instagram is country bombshell, one word. And I post about business, I post about bodybuilding, I post about fitness and life, and I have a really cute dog and goats. So I post a lot of stuff there. You can follow me there.
Awesome. Carly, thank you so much for taking the time today and joining me on the More Than Your Age podcast.
Thank you for having me.